Scaling personalized student outreach with limited resources is tough. At Muhlenberg College, Shane Biglini used Element 451's AI first Ignite tools to generate a 12-month nurture campaign in minutes.
I remember sitting in a meeting. We were talking about long-term lead nurture for a graduate program. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to show off here a little bit. So I built out in the meeting, projecting on the screen, a 12-month nurture campaign, one email a month for 12 months. And I let it run in the background and I pulled it up on the screen and showed the emails. And they were like, how did you do that while we were talking about this? I didn't. AI did.
Harness the power of AI to communicate with students at scale in a single, streamlined marketing automation platform. Now your team can do more than ever with less time and effort. Visit element451.com to learn more.
So I think we're going to very rapidly see universities either adopt AI or struggle with being disadvantaged. I think we're going to see that happen faster than we saw it with this internet thing that, yes, is actually here to stay.
Welcome to Mastering the Next, a cutting-edge podcast that explores the future of graduate, online, and non-traditional education through the lens of AI and technology. I'm your host, Dr. Ray Lutsky, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Element 451. Join me for discussions with some of the thought leaders shaping the future of graduate enrollment management through technology. Mastering the Next is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that helps institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Higher education stands at another pivotal crossroads as institutions that finally embraced online learning are now facing the dual challenges of AI integration and delivering genuine career readiness. Beth Hollenberg, CEO of Everspring, joins us to explore how forward-thinking universities are approaching this evolution beyond merely putting programs online. Her insights reveal the growing imperative for higher education to not only expand access through technology, but fundamentally transform how students are prepared for rapidly changing workplaces. Welcome to the podcast, Beth.
Thank you, Ray. Really glad to be here.
It's great to have you. I mean, just for our listeners, if you wouldn't mind, just start with, how would you describe Everspring? You do a lot of stuff. How would you describe the organization you lead?
Yeah, I would describe us as a technology-first strategy and services partner to higher education. And we work with colleges and universities. We focus on their greatest points of leverage, and we apply technology and know-how to both solve their greatest challenges, but also help them identify and then capture their greatest opportunities. Largely that involves digital work, online work, but it also can involve reinvention and strategic consulting.
It's interesting that you talk about the leveraging what a university has right now. We're at this incredible inflection point in higher education right now. There's a great debate, if you will, about a lot of what's going on. I mean, there's debate about whether there should be a U.S. Department of Education. There's debate about the role of online education. There's debate about how artificial intelligence should be integrated into higher education pedagogy and student services and enrollment outreach. I'm just curious, how are you observing this point? What key shifts are you seeing in how institutions are approaching their next steps compared to what might have been going on before?
I think the great debates generally, and there are so many of them, as you know, whether a department should exist, whether online is good or bad, whether digitization is good or bad, whether AI falls into a good or bad, and whether online program management, which I'm sure we'll get to, falls into a good or a bad. I think it's an attempt to characterize education as one thing. And what we're actually seeing is it's not at all one thing. Prospects come to education with radically different needs and aims. Universities have really different strengths and weaknesses and roles. And even when you look at the university of what I'll call the sort of elite university of yesteryear, the only mission-driven sort of bastion of sort of elitism, even that's really different when you have huge universities that are very practical and skills-based. So I think that what we're seeing across the board is universities having an identity crisis. They're struggling with who they are in a landscape that's being disrupted by technology, and finding the edge of adaptation that's both true to their competencies and also is going to lead them forward in an increasingly competitive landscape. So we're seeing all kinds of changes in how students search, in what universities are looking for, about how they consume services. So I would say this is an era of both great debate and creative destruction and reinvention.
I love that, creative destruction. I think that there's a reinvention happening. You know, as institutions look at the enrollment cliff coming and they look at all the challenges they're facing, and they're sort of grabbing for two big levers. One of them is like international education. And then in recent months, we've seen how that might be a very slippery lever to pull right now with things that are going on in terms of changes and student mobility. But online education is the other one. And it has been for a while now. And you mentioned the OPM model. Online program managers are out there. You work with institutions to build their online programs. And scaling those programs is a strategic priority for many institutions. But beyond reaching a broader audience, growing the enrollment funnel, how are universities balancing that expansion with what you just said, with who they are, with their institutional strengths, what they want for their graduates?
I think that universities are facing great confusion and indecision. And I think for many universities, it won't be a matter of bolting on some quick fix that will generate incremental revenue. And I think online was a really interesting evolution where I'd say 15 years ago, it was tolerated, but not accepted. Then it became accepted pre-pandemic, which was, there was the varying use of online as a modality. And then post-pandemic, it's become expected. And you look at the market where online is no longer a differentiator. Single example, I think there are more than 600 online MBAs. And if you start counting alternate master's degrees within business, more than 1,000. So when you look at how should a university look at solving a revenue problem, that ends up being a related but different question about how should universities be building for the education of the future. And what I'd argue is if you're just trying to solve a revenue problem, the quick fixes are few and far between, if any, are even left. The more enduring way, and I think a lot of universities are increasingly asking this question, is how do we actually fundamentally reposition how we deliver education, how we're spending our resources in order to better meet demand for the next 1, 5, 10 plus years. It's a more complicated question, but it's actually also, I think, the question that the educational leaders of tomorrow are going to be focused on. And we see a divide between people coming and say, well, just fix this problem. And those that are saying, well, it's not just a revenue problem. It's about positioning for what a changing educational landscape is going to look like in the future.
AI-powered and people-focused. This is the future of higher ed. Join us in Charlotte, June 24 and 25 for the 2025 Engage Summit. Learn how AI transforms student engagement by blending scalability and authenticity. Enrollify listeners get 50% off with code Enrollify50. That's Enrollify50. Register now at engage.element451.com.
Why does simply buying technology and a consultant never seem to work, right? It's like,
Who hasn't been there?
Seriously though, who has the expertise to do this well? What does that look like? If there are folks out there in this space that are leading institutions to a place that maybe is, I don't want to talk about anyone in particular, but maybe down a garden path where universities are not going to be able to embed that know-how in what they're doing, and they're sort of left with things they can't operate. What should universities ask for? What is the proof of a successful deployment of that kind of stuff?
I love this question because I think we've seen a grand experiment in which, if you look at it, and we talked to many universities, they're like, well, we teach, we should be able to do this thing online. And anybody who's bought any kind of technology and yet doesn't know how to exactly configure it has been in this situation of technology alone is not enough. Money alone, without the know-how and without the technology, is also not enough. And anybody that's hired a big consulting company, you can get people that'll tell you what you should be doing, but if they can't tell you how to take the tools and use them most effectively, most efficiently, with the greatest agility, then you have pieces and parts. And so I see the proliferation of sort of like the consultant explosion, individual consultants that have expertise in one function. Maybe they know lead generation. Maybe they know branding. Maybe they were enrollment leads. Maybe they know marketing. Maybe they were learning designers, right? Go out and try to tell a university, this is how you put the entire ecosystem together. I think that's another example, whether people are getting that advice from a Huron or from an individual practitioner. We can tell you what to do. But what universities really need is someone that can show them how to do it, or they can actually do it for them and then hand it over to them. And so Everspring for a long time now has offered a build, operate, transfer. We actually get it stood up, and then a university has an option to take it over at a certain point of time. And so I think that gets a lot of universities sort of over this hurdle, because any one ingredient is like you have one ingredient in a recipe. It's not going to get you the finished product. And so I think a lot of universities are struggling with the idea of, well, how do we enter into an increasingly fast-moving, technologically complex world where just buying something doesn't give us the know-how we need to operate it successfully? And so I would say specialized advice may be very accurate and still not enough to get a university through the complex set of locks and gates that they need to travel to compete with the likes of folks that are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of learning cycles into this experiment. ASU being one, Southern New Hampshire, Western Governors, and even some of the larger institutions that have just had an online arm. So I think it's extremely competitive. Universities need to hit the ground with all the pieces of the ecosystem being covered if they're really going to go from sort of novice implementation to fully competitive.
You mentioned my alma mater, ASU, go Devils. And I did, but it brings up an interesting point. You've got these mega institutions that are doing all of this quite well, but there's really a challenge if you just try to replicate that and take some of the programs and put them out there into the world. So I think there is sometimes a field of dreams mentality among faculty and academic leaders that if we just build this academic program, people will enroll in it. Why don't all programs succeed equally? What is it that prevents schools from getting online programs out there that actually produce enrollment growth?
Universities are incredibly data-driven. And so I think the field of dreams has been validated by a past history when the market wasn't so saturated. And so you sort of look at this past where people would move something online, and because it was scarce and online was the differentiator, it grew and it was a first mover advantage and there was a lot of real estate. And so universities are very rational. I mean, we're in an era where we're talking about them almost like they don't know what they're doing and they can't, but that's not true. I mean, we deal with incredibly sophisticated people all the time, regularly, at every level of a university. So I think that was a very rational characterization of a market that no longer exists. So what we see is, first of all, you need to understand, we're watching a sort of almost consumerization of education, where within education, you have programs that respond to career skills that are broadly needed. Those are large consumer markets within education. Skills around business is a really big one. Social work is a big one. The technology vertical generally is also large and growing. So your program has to be in somewhere that has enough folks that want it, and it's got to be on a growth path. And then the program itself, we see a lot of Me Too programs, sort of vanilla. You'll get a degree, but there's nothing in the skills basis being taught or in the way it's being taught that would be differentiating. And so we're starting to see students behave like consumers that are making decisions that are going to cost them $20, $50, $75, $100,000. And so they're looking not just for the degree and the university brand that can take them where they want to go. They're looking for the skills. They want to be able to say along the way, I'm developing the following skills, and have that skills list be applicable to real world career needs. And for universities who have been in a growing market for decades, both pricing up and increasing volume. I mean, this has been an incredible growth era for universities to have to talk about things like where there is student demand or market demand, or to have to start thinking about the degree and what the subspecialty of skills are that'll differentiate them. Those are really foreign concepts for a lot of universities. And so not all programs grow the same because not all programs are addressing the same market need. And then not all of them are good at getting their voices out there. I mean, 12 years ago, I think there were several hundred integrating marketing platforms. Now there are in the tens of thousands. Marketing is data driven and it's a data science. And now we have AI, which is machine learning applied into that ecosystem. So even a great program that isn't already established in the market is sort of shouting into the wind in this extremely competitive, crowded, and intricate outreach environment. So I think all those factors can either line up to help a program succeed, or as a tremendous headwind that sort of universities that may be doing this for the first time, or even for the 100th time versus those for the 1,000th time, that are just competitively going to be disadvantaged.
It sounds like those early adopters of online education were really lucky, because they were able to enter a space that was a little greenfield, and they could put something out there that, since it was scarce, as you just said, they were able to see some success. But I'm really struck by a parallel here, and I'd love to pick your brain on this. There seems to be a parallel between that early adoption of online education and maybe some of the current caginess around artificial intelligence and integrating agentic AI into what institutions are doing. Do you see specific barriers impeding the incorporation of artificial intelligence into curriculum and program design and student engagement? How are you seeing that evolve? And do you think that this is a missed opportunity, kind of the way if some of those schools jumped into online 20 years ago, they would have seen the growth that ASU has seen? Schools that miss the AI train right now, are they putting themselves at a disadvantage?
I grew up just north of Silicon Valley. And so in the era where there was a before the internet and an after the internet, and a during the period where we were all trying to figure out, is this a hocus pocus or is it real? And so I remember those discussions. Is it valuable? How do we use it? What is it good for? What is it bad for? And universities are very thoughtful. And I remember early interactions with universities where universities were saying, well, is this internet thing really here to stay? I mean, we actually had someone say that to us not all that long ago. Is this internet thing really here to stay? And I think that can be its own barrier. The debate about whether this fast-moving, sometimes scary, intimidating sets of technologies are really going to be the future. We see universities lose a lot of time debating whether new technologies are value-filled or value-less, and then how to use them because they're trying to get it perfect, rather than, look, we're not going to get it perfect, because AI is a paradigmatic shift. There will be before the broad implementation of AI and after. And we're right in the middle of the great creative confusion around that, which is that there's going to be a lot of experimentation. And that's where we see the real power of consulting with people and working with people that know more about AI. In our initial incarnation, it was about LMS selection, and there were like 150 LMSs, and universities were trying to figure out what to select. We could help because we had done a 150 LMS survey, give them indices of what might meet their needs. With AI, it is going to be a big experiment, and the applications are phenomenal. So in curricular use, one of the ways that we're seeing folks be willing to experiment if they embrace AI is to improve critical thinking skills among students, to give the AI assignment that requires a good prompt, and good usage, and then to show your work like you used to do with math when calculators were banned. You'd actually show how you got there. That's teaching a critical skill within a field, which is exactly how competencies and skills blend in the workplace. You're not just doing data science, you're doing data science in a healthcare company or in a factory or in, right? So the application of skills. So I think we're seeing folks use AI in very creative ways in course development. We're also seeing really creative uses in and vital uses in marketing and search. No one, the Googleplex and marketing is so expensive. Nobody can buy their way to basically scale in that environment. And with the introduction of AI, 93% of millennials use AI regularly. Half of all prospects are now using AI as the tip of the spear. It's where they're starting their search for an education program. And they're using natural language. So what we're seeing, and you can't buy it. You cannot buy placement in AI search. So we're seeing, when we are able to work with universities to marshal the incredible depth of content, identify their true brand differentiators or their program differentiators, and work that into how we're constructing their marketing sites, we're seeing our partners appear very highly ranked in AI search, which to me is exciting because it's an ability to actually help the prospect get to the information that means most to them in English. They don't have to deconstruct what the keywords are, and lets universities use some of the wellspring of content they have into that environment. So I think we're going to very rapidly see universities either adopt AI or struggle with being disadvantaged. I think we're going to see that happen faster than we saw it with this internet thing that, yes, is actually here to stay.
I feel the same way. I feel like the calculator and the internet were looked at as, oh, this is going to fundamentally change higher education. And should we allow calculators? Should we allow computers? And then shortly thereafter, there were schools that required computers, and every first-year student was buying a notebook computer. And I think that adoption is happening in real time. We're seeing it, and it does relate to the outcomes for these graduates, whether they're online or on campus in this new AI-influenced landscape. So I'm curious, using your crystal ball and looking at differentiation of AI, education quality, online programs, what do you believe will distinguish the most successful universities in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think that a number of factors. I think the first is to not fear the change that's coming, but to find ways to embrace it. Because I think that the debate about whether it's coming or not, while understandable, is valueless. It does not put you out any more educated than when you started the debate. You may get a few other perspectives. It's important to happen, but you can't have that guide your strategy. So I think universities need to find ways to embrace the change and experiment with it. And I think one of the things that we've seen as a provider, because we offer all different kinds of implementations. So we have turnkey solutions, we have single function solutions, we operate online, hybrid, and supporting on-campus functions and programs. And so I think universities need to choose where and how they're going to experiment and allow that experimentation to happen. I think they have to be willing, as frightening as it is now when resources are pressured, to take some risks. I think that it's going to be important to engage expertise. When you have to learn something very quickly, you need to get somewhere, you hire someone who's been there. And so I think that being willing to embrace different models of partnership, both the ones that we offer, but there are many others as well, is going to be critical, because I think that getting to successful implementations and products and programs and ways of supporting their internal functions very, very quickly and with an efficient use of resources is at a premium. And so one of the things that we know, and this is not just about online programs sort of like, off in their lockbox. One of the things we know is that technology, especially when it's used to support transactional functions and it's configured correctly, is just really powerful, and it has huge efficiency value. Experimenting with technology does not, but knowing how to put it in place and use it and to protocolize it with know-how, there are incredible savings to be had that have been locked in successful online program management implementations. But when you unleash those and sort of release that know-how into the functions that power the university, either at a central level or across campus in different functions, it's really very powerful to see how a university can then scale up what's working by not requiring that it be only at the program level. And I think that universities that do that take successful individual program experiments and then spread that know-how or use it in their core functions are going to be hugely advantaged.
Time will tell. The siloed nature of higher education is often an anathema to that. But you're right. I think that model is valuable across the institution, and we're going to see more of that.
The other thing that I think, are going to continue to see pressure on is the student prospect perception of value. 5 years ago, nobody would call and ask us return on investment questions. We get them all the time now. And so I think part of the challenge that private, very highly priced universities are facing, that some of the big state institutions are not, is what's the return on investment? So I think the other ingredient for success is going to be an alignment between what universities are charging and the promotions, the raises, the career enablement that students are seeing from those degrees.
Return on investment, always the bottom line. Beth Hollenberg, CEO of Everspring, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, Ray. Really appreciate it.
So here's my take. Online program management is an art and a science that has become a product ready for higher education institutions to leverage. The most successful higher ed institutions are embracing technological innovation rather than resisting it. Beth's insights reveal that universities thriving in today's landscape are fundamentally reimagining their approach, integrating career readiness and AI competencies as core design principles throughout their online programs rather than treating them as an afterthought. As students increasingly scrutinize the connection between education and career outcomes, institutions that can rapidly adapt to workforce evolution while maintaining educational quality will deliver the compelling value proposition today's learners demand. The Mastering the Next podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Artis Cadieux, J.C. Bonilla, Mallory Wilsey, Brendan Henkel, Brian Gross, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.